Hey, this is Jay. We're going to talk about Mustang power steering. So this is my 68 Mustang, and it came with manual steering from the factory, and we've got some decent sized tires on there, and it's really difficult to steer. So one option was go factory power steering, but those kits are really expensive. There are retailers that sell electronic power steering kits, but again, those are about, the traditional hydraulic power steering kits are about $2,000 plus installation, and then even the aftermarket kits for power steering that are kind of prefabbed, those go for around $1,500, plus tag shipping, and you got to install it. So I decided to go with the Prius power steering. So that's what I got. I went to the junkyard and picked up this. This is from an 08 Prius. You get the box and you get the controller. And then I did buy a electronic controller for the power steering unit that can adjust how much assist that you get out of this motor. That was like $100 from, I believe it's EPAS. So just wanted to give you guys a couple of heads up. So number one, when I went to the junkyard, I thought I was going to get a deal. I looked on eBay, and these units with the controllers and all the linkages and everything, they run about somewhere around $200. I thought, I'm going to go to the junkyard. I'm going to save a bunch of money. So I went to the junkyard, pulled this out. When I looked on the website for the junkyard that I went to, it was like $120. So by the time I drove an hour to get there, waited in line to get in. Luckily, I found a Prius that was partially disassembled, so it was fairly easy to get the unit out of there, and then got the control unit as well. But my mistake, they charge you one price for this, and the control unit is a separate price. So at the end of the day, I spent half a day doing it, got dirty. It was hot, dirty, rolling around in the dirt, and I spent the same amount of money that I would had I just gone and ordered it off of eBay. So that's the thing. One thing you could look into is if maybe you can find a private party that's parting out a Prius, then you might be able to get it cheaper that way. That would be, if I had to do this all over again, that would be what I would do, or what I would investigate first. The other thing that I didn't want to do was a bunch of welding. So I can weld a little bit. I've got a Harbor Freight welder and can do little things. But I didn't want to be welding, steering joints together and doing all that stuff. I'm sure I could figure it out, but I wanted a little bit of an easier way to do things. So let's kind of get into what I purchased, because a lot of this stuff, I got all this stuff off of Amazon, and here let's kind of jump into it. So in order to connect this, you have to go from the drive side, which is this side, to the steering box itself in the car. So what I bought here was, and this is DD 3/4 inch to 11/16, and this is a 36 spline. This fits perfectly onto the drive end of the motor. Then I have a DD bar. I have a Firewall bearing that I purchased from Amazon. I'll put links to all this stuff in the video description. And then over here, this side is going to go directly to the steering box, and this one, I believe, maybe, let's see, which one is which here. That one's 11/16, and this one is 3/4 36 spline. So, and again, I'll put links to all this in case I'm giving you incorrect information. So I've got a coupling here. I've got one here, U-joint steering adapter, and that gets me from the motor to the steering box. I do need to cut this shaft to length and get everything lined up. The other thing that I did was in the car, and I can show you that. So in the car itself, I can get the light correctly on there. I made that plate. I used the pattern from the gasket, drilled the holes. For the center hole, I used a hole saw to get the hole correctly placed as close as I could get it, and then just kind of marked it with the hole saw, and then I used a small Dremel wheel to grind out that hole. So pretty simple. It's just sheet metal. I'll throw a link to that in there as well. I got that off of Amazon for like $6. So now I've got from the steering box, I've got the joint here. I've got the 3/4 inch DD. I think this bar is like 16, 18 inches with the bushing, and got that. So on the other side, this is where it gets really interesting. So now you have to be able to connect the steering column to the motor and also the steering wheel and the steering shaft. So this is the original steering shaft, and one thing I learned by taking this one apart is that while it looked like it was round up here, it is actually 3/4 DD in the middle of the shaft section. So what I got here on this side, so we have the wheel side here on the motor. This piece comes off. This is the old, where you connect the old wheel to the Prius. Remove that. I trimmed this down to about 2 inches. I trimmed this tube down because I need to get this joint in the right spot to take advantage of this DD spot on the steering shaft. So I needed to get this joint down further, closer to the motor. So I also cut off some of the spline. So now I can take this joint, which is a 3/4 DD, that's going to go onto this shaft here. And this side fits right here. So it's a little bit loose. It's a little bit, this is a weld joint as well. So if you look at the description in the link, you will see there are no set screws. I installed these. I drilled and tapped these holes. These are 1/4 by 20. And then I used cutoff wheel to shorten them so that they will lock up tight. And the other thing I found out is over here, I had some of those exhaust wrap zip ties. So just putting one of these in here like this, see if I can do it with there, holding you guys with the phone, I can get it a little snug, just kind of, I'm actually going to do it the other way, so I have, let's make sure this makes sense here. I'm going to have this on the reverse side of where the adjust nuts go, like this, oops, and we'll put that in, oops, like there. So essentially, I'm just kind of centering as best I can, putting a little shim in there to tighten it up, and then I'm going to do Loctite on those and crank them down. So this gets me from the steering input to the shaft up to the wheel. The nice thing here, I'm not really worried about this joint because there's not a lot of pressure. As long as the motor's running, there's not going to be a lot of actual pressure on this side of the system, unless you're turning the wheel with this off, because you can turn this, with this joint for safety. You can turn this when the motor is not engaged, or you don't have power going to the motor. The other thing that I needed to figure out, if you look at the EPAS kits, a lot of those, I downloaded the instruction for those, and they make a custom collar that goes around here. I bought this one off of Amazon. This is 1/2 inch inner diameter. It's 9/16 wide, and it's like 2 3/8 on the outer diameter, plus whatever gap that you're gonna have a little bit there. That was the closest thing I could find off of Amazon that would fit. I looked around, other sites and really couldn't find anything that's kind of pre-manufactured. So if you had a lathe, you have something you can custom make, that would be super cool, because what I ended up having to do was round out the bottom end of this. It looks horrible. I'm gonna clean it up and paint it a little bit so it doesn't look so horrible, but now at least I can fit this end on to the collar, and I'm going to put some set screws in there to lock it down. So that gets me locked in completely to the motor with the or the actual steering column. So I cut the steering column right here at where this bellows looking thing starts. That's the collapsible section if you get into an accident. So we'll see how that goes with everything not being collapsible if we ever get into an accident. The other thing to note is that there are multiple tubes in this. This was actually how it works. So there's internal tubes, and one of the things I was struggling with when I taken this apart was, how am I going to lock down this upper section to the column? Because once you take this part off, there's really no more bolt or anything to bolt it to. So what I ended up having to do, you can see it from here, if I can get that section out. So I ended up slicing this section off with a cutoff wheel. This has the internal nut. It's clocked to go into this set screw from the factory. So if I add in the set screw here, like that, now I have a place where I can physically attach this tube section of the column. I did have to do a little bit of welding, so I boogered some washers on here and drilled out and also kind of custom made a machine screw that fits those threads to the right length, because you don't want the threads sticking out and nailing your steering shaft in here. So I had to cut it to size. So now I can put the column in to the upper section and I can lock it down tightly, and then that takes care of the top end. And then once I build these guys, and I got to get the motor clocked where it's going to mount, and then I will be able to lock the motor in and lock the steering column in using the factory brackets in the original locations. So that's kind of going to be part one of this. The things I have to do now, I have to get the steering shaft cut to length, and I have to get the motor clocked as well, and the lower shaft that connects the drive output to the actual steering box. I need to install that and cut that. The only other thing that I did run into is I've seen a lot of these installs where they're clocking the motor, and the motor is, let's grab some light for you. So I've seen them to where the motor is hanging down quite a bit. So I don't want the motor hanging down into this area where you're going to hit it with your leg or anything. It's pretty much out of the way, but I didn't want to do that. So what I ended up doing was, I don't know if we can see up there, if I can get the phone up there, but I removed, there it is. You can see the old vent hole. So that's the vent hole. Mine were all rusted out and not working anyways. So the other thing I've got to do is get up there, and I'm just going to make a piece of plexiglass or something and seal that off so we won't have any vents. The other side is also missing on the other side. You can see it over here in this car. So somebody had already removed the other side in there. So I'm just going to make a couple of block off plates and block those off. I mean, we do have vent windows, so if we need fresh air, we can open the vent windows. So that's the only other thing I got to do. And then I got to get the motor clocked into there and maybe drill a couple holes for that bearing. So that'll all be in part two. So thanks for watching.